2 balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swing and a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined this morning by Matthew Moreno. And 2 days in a row, Matt, some breaking news. And this one trumps all of them. The news coming from Joel Sherman and John Heyman this morning. Clayton Kershaw, the GOAT, is coming back to Los Angeles, Matt. We knew this was a possibility. I think there was reasonable skepticism about whether it would be with the Dodgers, but Dodger fans can rest easy because Kershaw is coming back.
Yeah, I think there was probably a growing sentiment over the past, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe even a month that this was going to end up being the most likely outcome. Now, heading into the offseason, I wasn't, I think I even said if I had to pick between the Dodgers, Rangers, and retirement, I thought he would end up retiring.
Yeah.
And that was before, that was just kind of seeing him pitch through his shoulder injury last year and before he revealed that he ended up having surgery. But with that, in that same message, made it very clear that he intended to pitch in 2024. So then at that point, it came down to, okay, Rangers or Dodgers. Yeah,
I was with you. There was skepticism, and you mentioned it. So he has surgery in November on a torn capsule in his left shoulder. First surgery he's had. And this is a major surgery. I mean, there are lots of surgeries pitchers can have. Shoulder surgery might be the worst. It might be the hardest to come back from. A guy who's going to be 36 years old, all of this kind of thing. And yet he said, hey, I'm looking forward to playing again. So then you knew it was Dodgers or Rangers. And there's been rumblings about the Rangers and some of the regional television money and whether or not that would hold stuff up. On the flip side, well, not to mention all their guys are hurt. So they've already got 2 or 3 starting pitchers they're waiting for. But when the Dodgers go out and get Ohtani and they go out and get Yamamoto and they go out and get Glasnow, while you could make a case that the rotation was filling up, I think the greater argument was, is Clayton Kershaw really going to say no to this? Right. The answer is no. He's coming back for a 17th season franchise record, which is another piece. He's now the longest tenured Dodger ever, I believe I read this morning. And so it's, we're going to get to effectiveness of Clayton Kershaw, all that kind of thing. But I think I said this, Matt, when on Twitter, it's officially an A+ offseason for the Dodgers. It was an A with Ohtani and Yamamoto. This is the cherry on top. I mean, technically probably an A+ either way, but Kershaw coming back, to me, I've joked I'd give the guy a lifetime contract. However long he wants to be a Dodger, he can come back. To me, this is the cherry on top and makes it, just rounds out the offseason in perfect fashion, just a couple days before pitchers and catchers report.
Yeah, I'm with you on the standpoint of, as long as Kershaw wants to keep pitching for the Dodgers, that, figure out a way to make it work, whether it's, 1-year deal or if he says, next time around, maybe I want 2 years or an option or whatever the case is. Franchise legends like this don't come around very often. He's had his struggles, and yes, like some of it didn't look great last year. And I know we'll kind of get into that a little bit more, but at the end of the day, he's a Hall of Famer, and he's somebody who was drafted by the Dodgers, has only played for the Dodgers, so keep him with the team as long as he wants. In terms of the offseason grade, I know you caught yourself a little bit. It was hard to not already give it an A+. I will agree that Kershaw, on top of everything, is basically, kind of the cherry on top, as you mentioned. And yeah, I mean, it's we're seeing all the comments, so I know we should probably get to those. He still is a little bit of a polarizing figure, which I find somewhat interesting.
Yeah, here we go. Juice with the super chat. Thank you, Juice. We appreciate it. He said, as long as Kershaw is healthy, he can be very effective. How about moving him to a relief role? I want to talk real quick about this first part. He can still be very effective. You mentioned that he was polarizing. Okay, let me throw some numbers. First of all, 2.46 ERA last season. So with all of the injury, when was he hurt? How hurt was he? All that kind of stuff. 2.46 ERA is amazing at all times. But this was the part that was interesting to me, Matt, as I was looking back this morning. So June 27th, right before the All-Star break, is when he went on the injured list. And he reported some shoulder soreness, which, again, we now know he's had surgery to repair a torn capsule in that game. So prior to that game, here were Clayton Kershaw's numbers in 2023. He had pitched 95 innings. He was averaging 6 innings a start. He had more than a strikeout an inning, 105 strikeouts, just 24 walks. After that, he throws 36 innings. The strikeouts drop. The walks go up. His home run rate doubles. And you could just see, you're an eye test guy. He was grinding through stuff. He didn't have fastball velocity, which he never has, but he just didn't have command was the key piece. And you could go back to 2022 even, Matt, and look at his StatCast numbers prior to that, and he was fantastic. You won't find a single thing on his StatCast chart below the 72nd percentile. I mean, we were talking about a guy who was elite, 95th percentile expected ERA in 2022. Again, he carries that into the first half of 2023. Then he gets injured. He tries to grind through it. So I agree with the first part of this, Matt, that I still think he's very effective. He has always been effective. And if he is healthy, if he can come back healthy, I have no reason to believe he won't be.
Yeah, I agree. And what I will allow for is it's a big if this time around. Whereas before, it was dealing with back trouble and kind of worrying, okay, as much as he has sort of figured out a way to manage that, your back, like it could kind of go at any point. Like you're feeling great one day and the next day something happens and you're dealing with some pain. The shoulder stuff makes it a little bit more complicated. So I will allow for like us saying if he's healthy, when he's healthy, like that is a significant caveat. But yes, going back to last season, had he not gotten hurt, like there was a discussion as to whether he was going to start the All-Star game again. Like that's how good of a first half he was having, and he was healthy. And so I think if he could get to that level, then yes, he's going to end up being a significant contributor for the Dodgers. And really at this point, because as much as there is the caveat of is he going to be healthy because of his shoulder surgery, he's also not going to pitch basically until the second half of the season. So there's not going to be kind of the wear and tear on him leading up to October. So theoretically, if he can get healthy, he's made fewer starts going into the postseason, which is real. Like we've discussed, look, the Dodgers, they figured out the regular season. As much as I've been on here saying, don't take anything for granted. Like the regular season, whether they win 95 games, 102 games, like they have it figured out, right? Like that's down. It's the playoffs that the Dodgers are basically focused on. And so if he's healthier for October than he has been in years past, then that's what's going to end up mattering for the Dodgers.
One other stat, the 5 starts he made right before going on the injured list, 33 innings, 1.04 ERA, just 21 hits allowed and 30 strikeouts. I mean, he was dealing, to your point, he was a potential starter of the All-Star game type player. He gets injured. And again, I think you make a great point. It's easy for me to say, well, look what he did right before the injury. There is no guarantee you come back from this injury and go back to your pre-injury self. Like, I think you can write off the second half and say, hey, that wasn't him, even though the ERA was still pretty good. But I think you can still say just because he was pitching through a shoulder injury doesn't mean he's going to just snap back to himself. The second piece of this, moving him to a relief role. I think when you look at relievers, Kershaw, the stuff doesn't play up in the bullpen, I think is the problem. We've seen him be ineffective as a reliever in the postseason. So for PTSD purposes, I think I just want to stay away from Kershaw in the bullpen. We could get into the story that we did yesterday with Ryan Brazier coming back, Caleb Ferguson being traded. I think the bullpen is full as well. So I don't think he's going to be a reliever. I can't see that working just because the guy's going into his 17th year. He's only been a starter. He doesn't throw hard. He's kind of a recipe for disaster in the bullpen, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think the way the game has sort of trended of late with bullpen relief pitcher profiles, Kershaw doesn't fit that at all. Like his fastball is not, if it's hitting 92 or 93, like that's
if it starts with the 9. If it starts with the 9, we're happy.
So, nowadays, like if you're a relief pitcher and you're effective, like your fastball's, sitting 96, and then touching 97, 98, 99. So Kershaw definitely doesn't profile. Let's give him credit. He has had some success out of the bullpen earlier in October. More recently is when the lumps have come in. So obviously that's what we're going to sort of draw more attention to. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I think if anything, if you want Kershaw to pitch in somewhat of a reduced role, if you will, basically just make him what he sort of was, heading down the final stretch of the season last year was, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense by any means, is he was a glorified opener, right? Like he wasn't going past 4 innings by the time the regular season was ending, both because, I think mainly because he couldn't with his shoulder. And we weren't, I think at that point, like Kershaw and the Dodgers certainly knew how significant his injury was. Publicly, they hadn't disclosed that. They were just, all day Roberts would say is that, he's not going to be 100%, but he could still be effective for us. So look, if you want him, like I said, have him open a game, let him pitch 3 innings, maybe 4 innings, and then that's it.
Yeah. And it's worth pointing out again, pre-injury, he was averaging 6 innings per start. So I think the fact that was down to 4 and change afterwards, it was directly related to the fact that he had left shoulder soreness on June 27th and came back in August and continued to pitch. Roman, another super chat here. He said, the signing makes the baseball gods happy and it makes me happy. Regardless of his performance, I'm okay with this. Question, is there a chance he throws harder? I would not bet on it. Coming off shoulder surgery, I think we're going to be lucky if he's throwing at all. But I think the good news, Matt, is he has proven that even as his fastball velocity has declined, it hasn't mattered. Like, the guy can still pitch with the best of them, even if fastball velocity, like I'm looking at his StatCast stuff and they have breaking ball value basically. And like last year, for example, his fastball run value was 57th percentile, which is crazy for a guy who's throwing 91 miles an hour on a fastball. He's still above average as far as effectiveness, but his breaking ball value, 99th percentile, is among the best breaking balls in the league. So I would say he's definitely not going to be throwing harder. I shouldn't say definitely. Highly unlikely he's going to throw harder, but I don't think it matters.
Yeah, I'll split the difference here. I think he'll potentially throw harder than what we saw at the end of the season, but he's not going to necessarily throw harder than what we saw, the first couple months when he was pitching, like we said, at an all-star caliber. And I mean, the velocity thing, yes, it's nice and it's catchy, and it certainly helps to have it. Then not like obviously, I mean, Kershaw has said like he was asked, I remember late last year, I don't know if it was after his like second to last start or somewhere in September, like has he sort of learned to pitch with what he has and does he enjoy it type thing? And he had maybe kind of laughed and said, no, like I would love to like throw harder, but like that's not an option for me right now. So fastball velocity, I wouldn't necessarily count on that. But the good news, like you said, is he's adjusted. He's capable of still being effective, successful. And at that point, it just comes down to more of, commanding the fastball and locating it is what's going to end up being more key for him when you're not, pumping 95, 96 type thing.
Totally. Let's get into some of the logistical pieces. Part of the reason the Dodgers could make this signing, reportedly reach an agreement today. He's set to undergo a physical on Thursday. The timing of that is because on Thursday, there's been some back and forth about Thursday or Friday. It sounds like it's Thursday is when guys can go on the 60-day IL. Is that right?
Yeah. So from the Dodgers standpoint, pitchers and catchers have to report by Thursday to Camelback Ranch to start taking their physicals and doing all that. And then their first workout is on Friday. So starting Thursday, because players are reporting doing the physicals, that's when the 60-day IL kicks in.
Okay, so the Dodgers, as of today, have a full 40-man roster. Ryan Brazier does not have room on that roster, nor does Clayton Kershaw. Starting on Thursday, though, they can move guys to the 60-day IL, which removes them from the 40-man roster. Now, Clayton Kershaw does need to be added to the 40-man roster before he can immediately be transferred to the 60-day IL. I also learned today that you can't just move a guy to the 60-day IL. There has to be a corresponding move to fill the 40-man roster spot as well. So basically what will happen is we know Dustin May, we know Tony Gonsolin, we know Nick Frasso, and we know Clayton Kershaw. All four will be moved to the 60-day IL at some point. So you can sequence those however you would like, basically. But Kershaw, in theory, will officially sign later this week and then immediately be moved to the 60-day out, which actually, Matt, would give the Dodgers, add Brazier, add Kershaw, immediately transfer him. In theory, the Dodgers will have 3 40-man roster spots open up by the end of the week, right?
Yeah,
because they're moving 4 guys plus Brazier.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say is, not only is Kershaw back for the second half of the season, but because he is going to go on the 60-day IL pretty much immediately, although for transactional purposes, they may not necessarily put Kershaw on the 60-day right away. I guess maybe they do. Well, yeah, there's a bunch of different ways they could do it because maybe they sign him. They don't do Gonsolin or May. Like they wait on one of them because that's typically how this stuff goes. Like they could announce like so-and-so is out for the season, but he's not on the 60-day IL right away because that's just not something you do until you absolutely need it. Yeah. So Kershaw May goes to the 60-day IL, then the Dodgers re-sign Kershaw, put him on the 60-day IL, and then re-sign Brazier. Yeah. And then at that point, maybe Frasso and Gonsolin still stay on the 40-man for the time being. But yes, there's a bunch of, and you could swap any of those players. Like it could be anybody. There's a bunch of different ways they could do it. But yeah, to your point, as much as Kershaw is back, he will be on the 60-day IL theoretically at some point soon. And so if the Dodgers want to do anything else, maybe re-sign Kike Hernandez, then that's a way to sort of do it.
What's interesting about that is at some point we always talk about the crunch on the 40-man roster. I think there's going to be a crunch on the 26-man roster is going to be the bigger issue for a guy like Kike Hernandez. Is I just don't know if they've got one of 13 position player spots available, barring an injury. But Let's talk about Kershaw and the pitching staff. The expectation for Kershaw is what? Like, are we hopeful that as soon as coming out of the All-Star break, he's back? Is this like August 1st, he's back? What do you think is like a reasonable expectation if he comes back? Like, I think it's worth pointing out that there is still no guarantee. He's early on in his rehab process. He's going to do everything in his power. He obviously wants this. The Dodgers are going to set him up for success. I still think it's worth pointing out there is a chance that this doesn't go according to plan. But hopefully, optimistically, is like August 1st what we're shooting for here, Matt?
Yeah, I think that's probably the safest bet. And I will, before I sort of dive into that, I will say, I think, when Kershaw was on, he did an interview with David Vassay on AM 570, I think in December. It was after the winter meetings. And he said his rehab to that point had already been going well. He was feeling better than he sort of anticipated. So that's encouraging. So I don't think Kershaw is the type of player that, considering now he's not signing until February, that if there had been any sort of significant setback between December and now, that he still would have signed a contract. He doesn't strike me as that type of guy. One thing he has always said is like he wants to keep playing so long as he's able to. So I am assuming, I'm giving him a benefit of the doubt, that I think the rehab process has been going okay. But yes, to your point, it is still different once you need to start pitching in games. So all of that being said, as I would put, I think late July, August 1st, August 2nd, type first week of August is the safest bet to count on his return. And again, the Dodgers, look, theoretically, they shouldn't need him for the regular season. It would just be a matter of getting him back in time to knock off some rust before the playoffs.
Yeah, and to your point, the Dodgers, the beauty of this is, much like Walker Buehler, who it's been reported this week will not be ready to go on opening day, the Dodgers don't need these guys on opening day. They need these guys in August, September, October. And Josh Thomas tweeted this out. I mean, here are the 12 guys the Dodgers have in their starting rotation group right now. Yoshinobu Yamamoto, who is the single highest paid starting pitcher in Major League history. Tyler Glasnow, who many people think is a Cy Young candidate. Bobby Miller, one of the top pitching prospects in all of Major League Baseball. You've got Emmett Sheehan, who was really impressive in his rookie year last year. James Paxton, who they just re-signed. Then you've got Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler, two guys who, again, when they have been healthy, have been incredibly effective. Our veterans have been there, done that before, and should be back at some point. And then as far as depth, you've got Landon Knack, who was added to the 40-man roster. You've got Gavin Stone, who was a top 50, top 100 prospect a year ago. Kyle Hurt, who looked good coming up as a reliever. Michael Grove, who we've seen sort of bounce between the rotation and the bullpen. And then River Ryan, who, oh, by the way, was a top 40 prospect on Keith Law's top 100, who's not on the 40-man roster yet, but potentially by the end of the season could be ready. And we didn't even mention Dustin May, who might be back at some point on the same timeline as Clayton Kershaw and Walker Buehler. Tony Gonsolin is done for the year. Nick Frasso is done for the year, unfortunately. But, I mean, you want to talk about starting pitching depth. Gavin Stone was like 7th on that list a year ago. Now he's like 10th on that list. And it just even the sequencing of knowing that you're going to get some of these guys back kind of midway through the season, I think is helpful, because it's not like they're all healthy now and then you have the risk of a bunch of guys getting hurt simultaneously. On the flip side, you're going to have reinforcements come. Walker Buehler is probably going to be ready, 3 or 4 weeks into the season. Clayton Kershaw, you're hoping is ready in August. Dustin May could be back in a hybrid kind of role in August-ish as well. And so the depth of the group that I just mentioned, Matt, I'll read this list one more time. Yamamoto, Glasnow, Miller, Kershaw, Buehler, Sheehan, Paxton, Knack, Stone, Hurt, Grove, and Ryan. Holy smokes, is that a group with some depth?
Yeah, and it's, I've pointed out that you can never have enough pitching depth. I think the Dodgers sort of do have it this year, at least, knock on wood. It certainly appears that way. And it's encouraging because the last 2 years, once they've gotten to the postseason, they've run out of healthy starting pitchers. Yeah. And we saw it, last year they needed to trade for Lance Lynn at the deadline, and we saw how that sort of panned out. I don't anticipate them being.
How did that pan out, Matt? How did the Lance Lynn trade pan out?
Like I texted you guys yesterday, Lance Lynn made playoff history, and we're just going to leave it at that. I don't anticipate the Dodgers running into that type of struggle or conundrum this season, and that's certainly helpful, because then at that point it's a matter of, hey, do we want to make a move? Like, do we want to go and maybe get another ace because we sort of can? And that could be, Michael Grove and Emmett. I mean, I don't see them trading Sheehan, but maybe some of the younger guys, like maybe they become trade chips just because there isn't necessarily room for them on the active roster, or if there's another part of the team that needs to be addressed, whether it's in the outfield or middle, or in middle infield, or whatever the case may be. Like, you have some flexibility there.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's worth pointing out that a lot of the young guys we just mentioned are a year older. So, while Landon Knack hasn't made his debut, River Ryan, who we mentioned, has not made a major league debut. Gavin Stone was ineffective, but has innings under his belt. Emmett Sheehan has made his debut. Bobby Miller, Kyle Hurt. Like, these are all guys that are going to be better 12 months later. So not only is there more depth, but the depth that you have is not. I mean, think about all the guys who made major league debuts. Bobby Miller made his major league debut. Emmett Sheehan made his major league debut. Stone made his debut. Hurt made his debut. Like, none of those guys are making their debuts anymore. They've already been up. They've already tasted it. So your 8th, 9th, 10th pitchers in the system are all guys who have been there and done that. And even Landon Knack, I would say, is an older guy, older prospect on that scale. And so when he has to make his debut, it's going to be less of a shock to the system for him than maybe some of these other guys. And so, the Dodgers, from a starting rotation perspective, are pretty solid. So I'll ask the question, Matt. Let's just hypothetically say that the Dodgers are healthy going into the postseason. We know Yamamoto's in that group. We know Glasnow's in that group. If they're healthy, I think those are the only two guys you can kind of write in pen. You've got Bobby Miller, you've got Emmett Sheehan, you've got Walker Buehler, you've got Clayton Kershaw. Who kind of would you pencil in? Everybody's healthy. Spots 3 and 4. Is it Buehler and Kershaw? Is it Buehler and Bobby Miller? Is it Kershaw and Bobby Miller? I'll let you go first on this one.
This is such a loaded question. First,
you're not going to leave Kershaw out of the postseason rotation, are you, Matt?
First, I want to know who's in your hypothetical, who's starting game 2, because I think we might disagree on that.
I would say Yamamoto and Glasnow. I'm not penciling them in as 1 and 2 necessarily. I just think if healthy, those two guys are locks.
I would put Bobby Miller game 2.
Oh, wow. So Bobby Miller's a lock.
It's projecting and it's assuming like he's going to, make some strides this season from last year. I would have him game 2.
Okay. So you've got Yamamoto or Glasnow 1, Yamamoto or Glasnow 3, Bobby Miller 2, and then Walker Buehler versus Clayton Kershaw for that 4 spot, or Emmett Sheehan. You want to throw a wrench into the whole thing?
No, I don't think. I think Sheehan would end up being maybe a bullpen piece if he, they liked him. I know he got his he got to experience postseason last year in that kind of role. Oh man, yeah, it's tough. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know because we're saying if healthy, but my mind can't necessarily process or take for granted that both Kershaw and Buehler will be healthy come October.
just a small assumption we're making here.
So okay, I would do Kershaw game 4.
Okay. I like it.
And I think, I think we might see, like I alluded to earlier, maybe it's a piggyback scenario where although Buehler doesn't he's said he's not really comfortable. He hasn't really found a bullpen routine, so he wouldn't really piggyback with Kershaw in a game 4. But maybe that's a Kershaw Sheehan game under different circumstances than what we saw the last time those two pitched together in the playoffs.
Well, and it's interesting too because I think Bobby Miller, there's a lot of projection, and you admitted it, but there's a lot of projection going in because we know what his prospect status was and how highly regarded he was, and he was good last year, but 3.76 ERA, Like I want to be clear that he was good last year. He wasn't unbelievable. He wasn't untouchable. And so, depending on how his season plays out, I think he's right in the mix of all those guys. Let's say he puts up a similar season. Could you see Bobby Miller being the guy that they kind of throw into the bullpen and say, hey, go throw 102 miles an hour for 2 innings here and there? Just because, to your point, Kershaw and Buehler make less sense out of the bullpen than maybe some of these other guys. But I don't disagree with you that Bobby Miller, I would probably have. I think it's just. I'm not gonna not answer this question. I believe in Walker Buehler. You believe in Walker. We've both been over this. We're retaining our Walker Buehler stock, unlike some other folks. I believe in Clayton
Kershaw. One of which who may be in the chat.
Yeah, one of which who may be in the chat right now. I told you my Kershaw opinion. This guy is good whenever he's healthy. He wasn't healthy the back half of the year. He had a 2.5 ERA last year. Again, we're talking about Bobby Miller. Oh, pencil him in like he's an ink for a top 3 spot, which again, I have no issue with. His ERA was almost a 1.5 higher than Clayton Kershaw's was last year. So we're just throwing that out there. So I just think it's tricky, but I think, look, Kershaw's the GOAT. Like, I'll die. I'll die with Kershaw on the mound. That's fine. And people are going to say, you are going to die. Playoff Kershaw. I know the whole thing. Kershaw on the mound. Give it to me. And, I think Walker Buehler can learn. If everybody's healthy, then they'll figure it out. Like somebody will have a bullpen role. To your point, maybe it's a Buehler Kershaw piggyback or something like that. But I would have to put Kershaw in there. It's just too much respect for that guy not to have him in there. But again, I would if I was going to go hot takey, I might have Bobby Miller 5th on that list. Like just from a perspective of, I might say, okay, how can I best utilize the 5 guys in front of me? And Bobby Miller becomes my sort of the way they used Julio in 2000. Like that. I'm just going Bobby Miller, like just crank up the engine, throw as hard as you freaking can for 2 innings, for 3 innings when I need you. Like I could see that him being more effective in that role than kind of the 4 other guys we're talking about.
Yeah, potentially. And I think, another thing to consider too is if we're assuming that Buehler is healthy.
Yeah.
And that he has pitched well enough to sort of warrant to remain in this discussion. Again, this is a hypothetical, like a lot of things can happen. He also has then the postseason experience that Bobby Miller doesn't necessarily have. And I like, Bobby Miller, I think can get to that point of being, a reliable starter. He just made his MLB debut, so his career is just beginning. Another thing too, though, is I wonder if Kershaw is starting a potential game 3 or 4, like, do they move him maybe up to a game 3? Because assuming the Dodgers have home field advantage in their postseason series, that then is the first road game of, whether it's the best of 5 or we're starting the NLDS at this point. So then, do you not maybe want Bobby Miller? Like, he's only pitched in 1 playoff game in his career. So do you not want him, what if it's a swing game, right? The series is tied 1-1. Like, do you not necessarily want him to face that pressure just yet? I'm not saying he's not capable of handling, but I think this is stuff. These are things that the Dodgers sort of factor in and take into account when aligning a postseason rotation. And also then, if they were to advance moving forward, what it means, if your game 3 starter, when can he next go if you advance and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think it's fair. Let's get to some questions, folks. If you've got questions, we've got a few more minutes here. I want to break down the Clayton Kershaw response. Give us your thoughts. Give us your reactions. If you want to chat through some of the stuff that we've been chatting through. Jeff T said, you forgot Yarbrough is another starter depth piece. That's fair. I think that's fair. He probably belongs in that conversation. If we're going to include Grove, I think Grove and Yarbrough are kind of in the same boat of reliever/starter, hybrid, bulk guy, etc.
Yeah, I think Yarbrough and Grove are basically the two, like, kind of the Dodgers are it seems like they're going to have a 6-man rotation without calling it a 6-man rotation. So Yarbrough and Grove, I think, are the 2 guys you're going to see throughout the season sort of, maybe make a start and then their next time is out of the bullpen and then maybe make another start and then back out of the bullpen, stuff like that.
Chico says we need to change our backdrop. Chico, this is as close as I ever get to the yellow seats. Okay. So it's like, I've got to have my moment here for a little bit and pretend like I'm sitting down low. Justin said, do you remember when Kershaw was LA's most expensive expenditure last winter? Times have certainly changed. That's fair. Let's see. Obviously, Ohtani, Yamamoto, Glass now. We assume Teoscar is going to be more expensive. I mean, heck, Jason Hayward might make more money than Clayton Kershaw this year. He could be. Paxton will make more money than Kershaw. I mean, because what are you expecting this number to come in at? It's got to be under 10 million, right?
I don't think so. I disagree.
Think they're going to pay him a full amount for 3 or 4 months?
I think he'll probably get maybe like a guaranteed 10 to 12, and then there'll be like maybe some incentives built. Like, and another thing too that I saw some questions earlier, and sorry, Justin, let me ask some just questions first.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember that very vividly. I was not pleased with how the offseason went last year. And I remember, Jeff, we had a conversation of, look, the Dodgers are sort of waiting, saving their chips. Like, they're going to end up, all these big names are going to sign everywhere. They're going to end up with replacement level players. That's kind of what ended up happening. Anyway, I'm glad that that's a thing in the past.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily, it's hard to say, like, look, you had to deal with that to end up getting Ohtani and Yamamoto. Like, fine, I guess. It's a little bit of revisionist history, in my opinion. But
yeah,
we're going to leave that in the past. Back to Kershaw's salary. Like, I think maybe it's 10 to 12 million base with some incentives. And let's not forget, he's chasing 3,000 career strikeouts this year. Yeah. I think he's 50 something away, more or less. And so, maybe that's 56. Kind of, maybe that's built in somehow. Starts or innings pitched. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Yeah, I if I had to guess, I think I would guess sub 10 is what he ends up with. Now, I mean, we were joking beforehand. Like, do you think there's any chance that this is more than a 1-year deal? That the Dodgers kind of protect themselves in some way and make this a 2-year deal and kind of say, hey, we want to be in this for the long haul with you. And so we're going to sort of like, do you think that's possible? Or do you think this is a 1-year deal in the same way we've seen him sign 1-year deals?
I mean, I'll hedge a little bit because I feel like as we're recording this now, it's 10:35. The news has been out for about an hour and a half. I feel like we probably would have heard if there was some sort of option. I think maybe a mutual option would have made sense just from the standpoint of, if the hope is Kershaw wants to pitch. Like, there's no denying that. The Dodgers and him are expecting that just because, like, who wants to be pessimistic and say, we're going to sign you and know, like, you're not going to pitch this year? But yeah, like, what if it doesn't work out? What if, he makes a couple rehab starts and starts to deal with some lingering soreness? And so, stuff like that, like, I could see where a mutual option would then make sense for the following year. If, like, look, this season didn't go how we anticipated. Do you want to come back? Yes, we want you back. We have room. But yeah, I mean, it's, or Justin Lamas is now saying Athletic reported 1 year with the player option. So I haven't seen that myself yet. But yeah, I mean, I guess that would make a little bit of sense.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything either. Fabian hasn't tweeted anything. Let's see if Andy McCullough is Kershaw's guy. He's usually the one that's on this kind of thing. Yeah, I don't see anything from either of those guys. There was a fun stat I just saw from Sarah Langs that this Dodgers team will be the 6th to have 4 or more former MVPs on the same team. So now Betts, Freeman, Kershaw, and Ohtani. The last team to do it, Matt, was the 2022 Dodgers with Betts, Bellinger, Freeman, and Kershaw. And the team before that to do it was the 2021 Dodgers, Betts, Bellinger, Kershaw, and Albert Pujols. Yep. So the fun fact, it's this only happened 6 times. Oh, the Dodgers have done it 3 of the last 4 years. Pretty fun stuff. Our guy Blake with the question, percentage chance that Kershaw actually pitches this year. I'm going to say 70%.
Yeah, I'm right around there, 65 to 70, 75%.
I just think, like, the one thing that I caught myself as I was saying, well, the 2-year deal, maybe that, like, Kershaw, it's like there's no preparing for next year for Clayton Kershaw in his mind. Like, I think it is full speed ahead. I mean, last year he probably tore his shoulder in June 27th and came back August 10th and pitched like 9 more games or something like that. So, like, I don't think this is a guy who's like, well, like, they got to Trinan. They signed him to the 2-year deal. They got to the end of last year. They're like, hey, you know what? For the better interest of everybody, we're going to shut you down. Walker Buehler, we're going to shut you down. Get ready for 2024. There's none of that with Kershaw. Like, it's like, hey, I'm 85%. Give me the ball. Like, we're ready to go. There is no 2025 that I'm caring about. So that's why my percentage is high. The surgery scares me, but if there's a guy who I would bet on to come back from this, it's Clayton Kershaw on this team in this season of his career.
And I think with that too, they didn't re-sign Kershaw because they need him to be the number 1 or number 2, maybe not even the number 3 pitcher in their rotation when he comes back, right? Like, this is very much like it's very much because it is Clayton Kershaw, and I think that's fine. Like, it's acceptable and that's okay. And then the other part of it is, look, like, if for whatever reason it doesn't pan out, like, the Dodgers should still be okay with the pitching depth that they've amassed.
Yeah, absolutely. TQT, I'm sure I'm in the minority, but I think Kershaw returning is more sentimental than anything. I don't think he comes back effective or healthy. Am I wrong here? We talked about this earlier. I cited all of the stats that he had prior to shoulder soreness last year. He was really freaking good. More than a strikeout an inning. Again, it was like 5-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. His 5 starts prior to the injury, 1.05 ERA. So I still think he's effective. He had a 2.46 ERA for the season, even with the grind and the duct tape that they patched him together with in August and beyond. And so I still think he's going to be effective. We just answered the healthy thing. I think 70% chance he comes back and pitches. And I've never seen Clayton Kershaw pitch and, like, big picture not be effective. So, like, until I see him string together like 3 months of like a 5.00 ERA, I'm just going to refuse to believe it's possible because he's such a good pitcher. So that's my view. You agree with that, Matt?
Yeah, more or less. I think when I saw him, really struggle, I think it was the beginning of September last year in his start against the Marlins. Like, that felt like rock bottom for him last season.
Yeah.
And I started to wonder, like, oh man, like, I don't know what the Dodgers are going to do, because at that point, like they needed him to not only pitch but pitch well. And then to his credit, like it's still, like I mentioned earlier, they still were shorter outings that came after that, but the results improved and he looked better and he got the walks back under control and stuff like that. So I mean, yes, it's a big caveat. Is he going to be healthy? Can he come back from a shoulder surgery? I get that's all reasonable and fair. I think it's possible, and I think if he can get healthy, that yes, he will be effective.
High wants to know, will Kershaw get the 56 strikeouts he needs for 3,000? He's never been below a strikeout an inning for a season. So like last year, it was 9.36 strikeouts per 9.76. So let's just assume he's at 9. He would need to throw theoretically 56 innings. If we're penciling him in for 5 innings-ish a start, that's 11 or 12 starts. That feels like a lot. So 56 doesn't seem like a big number, but when you break it down like that, I don't know if I see him getting it in 2024, Matt.
Yeah, I don't see it happening either, because I'm also not counting on his strikeout numbers being very high when he does come back, just because I imagine like there probably will be some rust, even though he is going through, he will presumably make rehab starts. It is different, going from the minor leagues, no matter what, even if you're at making those rehab outings with Oklahoma City, to getting back at the major league level.
Men have skin too. Question: if Paxton has an all-star season, somehow has an all-star season, would you consider trading him at the deadline, knowing the reinforcements that are on the way? Look, we hope we get to a situation where the Dodgers have so much pitching depth they don't know what to do with, but I mean, that would be a cool scenario if you're the Dodgers. Now, you're trying to win in 2024, so I can't imagine them being sellers, but if it's genuinely like we have 7 starting pitchers we love and not enough room, and prices are what they were at the last deadline, and it's James Paxton we're talking about here, like, I don't think this is the craziest idea in the world.
Not the craziest idea, but I wouldn't do it, because if Paxton is pitching that well, then he's somebody that you're going to want to have as some insurance. Because again, look, as much as I'm optimistic about Kershaw, there is a big caveat with him. Walker Buehler, the same thing. And again, the last 2 years, the Dodgers have appeared to have enough starting pitching depth. And then we got to October and they're scrambling to put plans together. And so, at the All-Star break, if they have 7 pitchers, I would say definitely keep him. If they had 10 healthy pitchers, then maybe, sort of consider it.
Okay, last question here. Hawaiian Kira. Any of you feel this could be his retirement tour? Matt, is 2024 the last season we see of Clayton Kershaw?
I think so. Okay. I thought last year was going to be it.
Yeah.
I'm glad that, the final memory is not going to be of him walking off after, that disastrous start in the playoffs. So, I think this is probably it for him.
I'm going 2025. Last year is 20. I just think it would be, I think we just talked about he's not going to get to 3,000 strikeouts this year. I don't think. And I just feel like coming back only to pitch 2-ish months, I think isn't necessarily what he's signing up for. And so I could see him coming back, pitching for a couple months, and then kind of saying, hey, 2025 is going to be my last run. We're with the Dodgers. We're going to get to 3,000 strikeouts. Ohtani's going to be pitching. I get to pitch with Ohtani, and we'll just ride off into the sunset that way.
What if the Dodgers win the World Series this year?
Okay, I think that would change it. I think you're probably right. I think if the Dodgers win the World Series, and depending on how his season goes, if he pitches and is moderately effective and is a contributor, then I could see him. Because again, I think the one thing we sometimes miss with Kershaw, he's just not wired the way that most of these guys are, from the perspective of he doesn't necessarily care about the things that a lot of players necessarily care about. Like he's not trying to maximize his earning. He's been signing 1-year deals. Like he's not worried about that stuff. He genuinely wants to go home and be dad to his kids and see his kids every day. And so while some guys are like pedal to the metal until the wheels fall off, I think Kershaw is that way, but he's not trying to play the long game. Like it's genuinely pedal to the floor. And if the wheels fall off at 34 or 35 or 36 or 37, then they fall off and I'll retire and I'll be happy. So I'm going 2025, but your caveat is a good one, Matt. If the Dodgers win the World Series in 2024, I think that would be it for him. So, hey, we appreciate everybody joining us. This is back-to-back days, a Monday and now a Tuesday morning with some live breaking news. So good stuff there from the Dodgers. We appreciate everybody joining us on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, those listening after the fact via podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google. Thank you so much. Make sure you check out DodgerBlue.com because we'll have a full write-up on the Kershaw decision. Of course, once contract terms are out, we will have a breakdown of that as well. And if you're new here, please subscribe, ring the notification bell. Content coming at you every single day, live shows throughout the week. And starting next week, it's full speed ahead. Pitchers and catchers report Thursday. First day of pitching and catching, I guess, is Friday. And so we will be full speed ahead starting next week. That is Matthew Moreno. I am Jeff Spiegel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day. And, of course, go Dodgers.